Hi, and welcome back to Bible 365 with Kathy Carter. And I'm Kathy Carter. This is Bible 365, which means that we are reading through the Bible in 365 days, about 3 to 4 chapters every day. And we are doing a chronological reading of the Bible. And what I'm hoping is that through your reading, you will discover more of God, more of Jesus. You will deepen your relationship and your faith with Jesus and learn to be closer to Him and love Him. And that will just strengthen you more as well. So it will strengthen your relationship with Christ, and it will strengthen you in your time here on earth. And so today we are on day 9, which is going to still be in Genesis. And so today we're going through the end of Genesis 25 through Genesis 28. And for those of you who have not been with me before today, we are doing the 1-year chronological Bible online version. So we are doing, that's the plan that we're working on, and it's chronologically or historically reading through the Bible. So it's not going to be every book in order in which it is written, but it's going to be every book or in order in which it's stacked in the Bible, but every book in the timeline in which it happened. So it's going to be done a little bit differently. And my hope is that it will actually give you a better picture of the way things happened through time. And so one of the things that I'm doing is I read the Bible every day. So before I come and I film, I read it, and then I just want to talk to you about my thoughts and the things that I feel are going on in the scriptures. And then if you guys want to comment, or if you just want to hear what those thoughts are so it can help you sort of process your reading as well, that's fantastic. But I'd love to hear in the comments. And I also would love if you would like and subscribe, because that will push it out to more people. That will get a bigger audience for our family of believers, which is exactly what we want. So today, on our January 9th date, what we did before is as we're going through the book of Genesis, we saw some of Abraham's descendants. So last week we met his wife slash concubine Keturah and the children that she had. We see that Isaac was sort of left alone, and all the other siblings were sent away. And then Isaac was married to Rebecca, and then Isaac and Rebecca had a set of twins. So we're coming down to, and then Abraham passed away. Abraham died. And so what we're doing is we're coming down to when Esau and Jacob were young and growing up. So in the end of chapter 25, we meet Esau and we meet Jacob. And then the one note that I want to point out is in verse 28. So this is the bottom of chapter 25. And so in the bottom of chapter 25, we see verse 28 where it says, Isaac, who had a wild taste for game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. And I want to point this out because the expression that we use, loved, I think is synonymous just with so many things, in so many ways that we use it. And I say this because I don't think when it comes down to it that Isaac doesn't love Esau or that Rebekah doesn't love Jacob. And so by saying that they love the one, I don't think it negates the fact that they love the other, but it seems to look like they each put that sibling up above the other sibling. And so, as in order. So Isaac seems to love Esau, and interestingly enough, it seems for a reason, and it is that he has a taste for wild game, and Esau is a hunter, and he goes out and hunts. But Rebekah loves Isaac, and so for some reason Isaac has favor in her eyes, and because of the wild game, Esau has favor in Isaac's eyes. And you just don't want to take away, I don't think that they hate the other sibling. I think it's just that they put that sibling first in their eyes. And so then moving on to verse 26. Well, in verse 25, or in chapter 25, Esau sells his birthright to Jacob, which means because Esau is firstborn, even though they're twins, Esau is the firstborn twin, Jacob is not. So Esau technically would be getting everything, much like Isaac got everything. Esau would be getting everything on the death of Isaac. And in this area, they actually switched places. So Jacob, because he made a meal, Jacob actually wound up taking the birthright from Esau. Esau easily gave it up because he was starving, And he used big words like, what good is the birthright to me? I'm about to die. So this extreme idea of he was so hungry, he was about to die, and then he gave up his birthright because of it. So then Jacob had that. And then moving on to the beginning of Genesis 26, going right to verse 1, it says we've sort of changed perspectives here. Now we're going back to Isaac, and it says that there was a famine in the land. And so Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines in Gerar. We've actually met Abimelech before. Abimelech at one time was with Abraham. And so just a note here of being unsure if this is the same Abimelech that met with Abraham or if this is a different Abimelech. And so it could just be a title. Even if it's a title, it still could be the same Abimelech. We're not 100% sure because it doesn't tell us definitely if it is or not. If it is, then it's the same one that met Abraham. If it is not, then it is one that took the place of the Abimelech before, and now he's dealing with Isaac instead of dealing with Abraham. So again, just letting you know that this is this possibility. I don't know if it makes too much of a difference either way. So God prevents him. So he's moving from I'm going to kill these names, but Bir Lahoiroi, and he's moving from there because there's a famine, and he moves up to Gerar, but then God meets him on the way. And God says, don't move to Egypt, stay in this land. And so this is the first time we see that Isaac has met God essentially face to face. Isaac has met God. God speaks to him and says, don't move, stay here. And Isaac does follow that. And then he creates an altar and then meets with God in this altar. So verses 3-5 are ones that I want to note because in verses 3-5 it says, stay in this land for a while, and I will be with you and will bless you. For to you and your descendants I will give all these lands and will confirm the oath I swore to your father Abraham. So if Isaac stays in this land, God is going to confirm that covenant that he already made with Abraham. And then he says in verse 4, I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and will give them all these lands. And through your offspring, again, we go back to that single offspring, all nations on earth will be blessed. And this I think is interesting, verse 5, because Abraham obeyed me and did everything I required of him, keeping my commands, my decrees, and my instructions. So Isaac is blessed with a covenant with following Abraham because Abraham honored God. And now he's asking Isaac to honor him by doing what he asks and staying in Gerar. So he's asking him to honor him in that way. So we have a part to play in our faith and in our relationship. God asks us to do something. We respond by honoring God, by doing the thing that he asks us to do. And for those of us who are sort of new in the faith and trying to wonder what it is that God is asking us to do, that's what this whole reading is about. This whole reading is that we're going to find a lot of the things that God is asking us as a people to do. And so when we follow these things, we find our relationship deepening with God. And we can see that's what happened with them because the covenant continued because of the way that they responded. Now, when I read this, we go back to an area where Isaac does exactly what Abraham did. And he goes through this land and he says that his wife is his sister. And so then the king notices and sees that he's really affectionate with her and recognizes it's his wife. And so he asks him about it. And Isaac answers him and says, she's really your wife. Why did you say she's my sister? So that's verse 9. And continuing in verse 9, Isaac answered him and said, because I thought I might lose my life on account of her. Much like Abraham, he is willing to give up his wife to save his own life. And this is like a futile thing that they keep showing is the wrong thing to do. And the king keeps saving the wives because the men keep giving up the wives because of their fears of their own life being lost. And so first of all, I'm not sure why they would think, it makes me think of, because I don't know why they would think that the king would take their wife, or if the king was unable to take the wife because it was his wife, that they would kill them. And so it just makes me think about how there are foreigners still in this land. Like, this is not their land. They don't own this land yet. God actually hasn't given to them. He keeps promising it to them, but he hasn't given it to them. So they don't live on their land. They are not a native people in this area yet. So somebody else is living and owning this land, and they're sort of borrowing the land. And so they're not in that people group, and therefore they don't have the rights of that people group. And so they actually don't have any rights, and maybe everything can and possibly has happened before where everything has been taken from them. And so they need to live in such a way that they recognize that everything can be taken from them and stop being so fearful of everything being taken from them. This Isaac and Abraham, they have the protection of God. And I think they consistently forget, and we're shown that they consistently forget that they have God's protection. And so they don't need to be fearful of what other people will do to them because they have the protection and the love of God. And it brings me just, it's a reminder for my own faith that when I get scared and I think that something is going to be taken from me, or something is something that I think is mine, I'm afraid to lose it. I'm afraid to give it up. I think that's a lesson to understand that I should be able to hold it loosely in my hands and just to let it go. Because if it is taken, two things: God will give it back to me because of my relationship with God, or it wasn't mine necessarily to begin with. And so I have to remember that this is not my land. This is not my home. I am a foreigner living on this soil, earth, because eventually I will be with Jesus in a new place. And so I need to stop protecting what I think is mine here on this earth, which, like, for me would be my spouse or my kids. That would be a big thing that I would want to protect. And not that I shouldn't protect them, but that I need to actually be able to give them to God and leave them in God's hands, because God protects them more than I do. Like, God has a bigger stake in their lives than I do. I love them, but God loves them so much more than I do. So I need to be willing to let them go and let God do the protecting, and just let me just have faith that God loves me enough to honor that blessing, to honor that protection. So, because I just think it's weird that he constantly, going back to the story, I think it's weird that they're constantly afraid of what the kings do for them. And I can only imagine it's because they don't actually live there. So moving on to verse 9. Oh, we did that, losing his life. And then we move to verse 11. And this is what I noticed in verse 11, is that Abimelech gives orders to all the people. So after all of this happens, and Abimelech is so frustrated with him and angry, but then Abimelech gives orders to the people that anyone who harms this man or wife shall surely be put to death. So once again, we see that God has protected this lineage as he said he would, because his covenant is with them. So he protects Isaac and he protects Rebekah, and then in turn, he protects their family because of that. So he gives orders to Abimelech to do that. Verse 12, it says, Isaac planted crops in the land, and that same year reaped 100-fold because the Lord blessed him. So we're back on the Lord blessing him. The man became rich, and his wealth continued to grow until he became very wealthy. He had so many flocks and herds and servants that the Philistines envied him, and then they pushed him away. So then we see he starts to move from place to place, and he starts opening wells. Every well that he opens garners water. So every single well that he pops into, it springs up water. They keep trying to take it from him, and he keeps getting water. And then the Lord protects him. Then always the Lord protects him and follows him. And then in verse 24, it says, that night the Lord appeared to him and said, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. I will bless you and will increase the number of your descendants for the sake of my servant Abraham. So once again, we see that God is constantly protecting Isaac and all of his offspring. So in verse 26, moving on, Abimelech has come to him with his personal advisor. So this is another thing that I saw that we go back to chapters earlier, is that it's now Abimelech and Phicol is what I'm going to call him. If we go back to chapter 21, verse 22, it says, at that time, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his forces, said to Abraham. So those same two people go and meet with Abraham, and these same people are meeting with Abimelech. So they say the same, this is that same idea that they had with Abraham, is they see that the Lord is with him. And so they want to make a treaty with him. And so the two of them make a treaty. Well, the three of them make a treaty, and they live together sort of comfortably on this land. Then we see that Esau marries two Hittite women. Now, I'm not sure why Rebecca is so angry, but Rebecca is angry about it. And it could be, it's a source of grief for Rebecca and Isaac. And it could be because they are Hittites, or it could be because there's two of them, or it could be a mixture of both. And so we're not 100% clear from the story why she would have grief. But what we do know is Esau is not doing things to honor his parents, excuse me. So Esau is not doing things to honor his parents, and therefore not doing things to honor God, because he's not honoring his parents in this situation, because they find grief. And then what we see is eventually they're going to send Jacob away in order to find a wife from their homeland. So before we get there, though, we go to Genesis 27. And this is where Isaac sends for Esau. So this is an interesting story. Isaac sends for Esau, and he asks for game, right? And so Esau meets up with him, and then he says, I want to offer you a blessing, because remember what we read before is that Isaac loves Esau. So again, I'm thinking loves him more, which feels like a terrible expression, but he puts him first for certain. And so he says, I want to give you a blessing. And so find me game, bring it to me, feed me, and then I will give you this blessing. And so Rebecca she overhears it, and she doesn't like this idea. So she works with Jacob to usurp, which is Jacob's name, to usurp this plan, to then give Jacob the blessing instead of Esau. So as Esau leaves, because Rebecca loves Jacob. So as Esau leaves and goes out to hunt game, Rebecca plans this situation with Jacob. Now, Jacob objects. So I want to be sure to let you know that Jacob objects. However, Jacob does not object to the plan. Jacob objects to the fact that he thinks he's going to be caught. He says, my father's going to know that this is not Esau and this is me. And so his only objection seems to be from getting caught and not from doing the plan in the first place. And then Rebecca unfortunately finds a way around it and makes some skins to make it seem, to appear as if it is Esau. So the two of them sort of scheme to take this blessing away from Jacob's brother Esau. And so they do trick him. They bring him food. He says it sounds like Jacob, but maybe it's Esau. It seems to smell like Esau. It seems to feel like Esau. And so after eating the food, Isaac gives this blessing to Jacob, thinking it's Esau. So what does he get? So the verse is down in 27, and he says, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. Then he asks for God. He says, may God give you heaven's dew and earth's richness, an abundance of grain and new wine. So here we go. The land is going to be blessed. Jacob's land is going to be blessed by God. And then he says, may nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. So he's going to be some type of ruler that people will bow down to him and serve him. And then it says, be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. So here we are, even he's putting Jacob in such a place where his brother is going to be bowing down to him and serving him. So there, once again, we go back to that prophecy that was back a couple of chapters ago, where we see that they're going to be separated, that there's not going to be unity among these two brothers, because one is going to serve the other. And where we thought it was going to be Esau, that would be because he's the older brother that would be in charge. What really happens is that Jacob winds up being the one that is in charge, and then Esau is going to bow down to him. And then it says, may those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed, which I feel like is kind of the best part of the blessing that he gets, because when he's being blessed, others will be blessed because of that. And I think that's a beautiful picture of what God does, is when and it's something I think to remember myself, is when other people are blessed by God, to remember what a beautiful thing that is. And when we're around each other, we're sort of all blessed together. And those of us who share in the family of God, God is lifting and blessing all of us. And so the blessings are all there for all of us. So after this, he finds out that it's actually Jacob and it is not Esau. He's sort of brokenhearted about it. Esau asks for a blessing as well. But the reality is that Jacob, or excuse me, Isaac gave Jacob everything. There is nothing left for Esau to get because he gave Jacob everything. My sort of confusion in this is how he could have given Esau everything and then really not given things to Jacob. And so, again, I guess it goes back to the fact that he loved him more because he leaves nothing left. And so, in essence, he's kind of burned because he gave probably too much to what he thought was Esau. And so then the real Esau is actually going to get nothing. And so what we find out is in verse 39, Isaac gives him this: your dwelling will be away from earth's richness. So here we go. He's not even going to be anywhere near. It's not even he can share in the blessing of Jacob. His stuff's not going to be anywhere near the earth's richness. It's going to be away from the dew of heaven above. He's going to live by the sword and he's going to serve his brother. So there's going to be violence in his future and he's going to be a servant and he's not going to be a master. And then when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck. So maybe eventually, this seems like eventually there's going to be some kind of light at the end of the tunnel that he will eventually be able to be released from serving his brother. Moving on to Genesis 27, actually down to 27 and kind of that top edge of 28. Esau is rightly furious. And he says in his heart that he's going to kill Jacob. And so Rebecca once again finds out. Rebecca once again sets up this whole plan to get Jacob away, to have Jacob run and go into a different area. So she talks to Isaac and she convinces Isaac that Jacob just needs to go get a wife from her family, which is Laban, which again we met a few chapters ago. Laban is her brother that we saw maybe did a little bit of a shady dealing. He was trying to keep Rebecca from going for a few days. And so she's sending Jacob over to meet Laban to find a wife from that area. So again, this I feel like has some similarities between Abraham, when Abraham was so adamant about having Isaac have a wife from his family. Now Isaac and Rebecca are encouraging Jacob to go find a wife from her family. So in that same area, so Abraham's family, Rebecca's family, and now we're keeping it in the family of what we would say is family of faith, because that's where Abraham came from. And so he's sending him to go find a wife there. And then we see once again that Isaac is blessing Jacob. So in verse 3, 28:3, it says, may God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and increase your numbers until you become a community of peoples. May he give you and your descendants the blessing given to Abraham. So now he gets this first son blessing, so that you may take possession of the land where you now reside as a foreigner. So here we go. Abraham was promised the land, Isaac was promised the land, and now Jacob has been promised the land. The land God gave to Abraham. So it's this area of Israel, this area of Canaan, where they are still living as foreigners, and yet this land is being promised to them through the descendants. Abraham did not get the land. He died without the land. We're going to see what happens to Isaac before they get the land, and we'll see what happens to Jacob. But as of right now, this promise is still kind of going through the sons, the descendants of Abraham. And so we will see what happens tomorrow with Jacob. Does he meet a wife? We will see what happens when he goes to meet Laban, and that will be on day 10. And so we are done for today. And I would love if you subscribed. I'd love if you offered your opinion. I'd love to see some of the things that you guys read in the comments. This was a really big chapter. It had a lot of stuff in it. And so I'd love to see if you saw anything that looked interesting or different to you, that you saw that really excited you. Please subscribe to the channel, like it, share it with your friends. Encourage your friends to start reading. You can start it any day. You do not need to start on January 1st. You can start at any time during the year, as long as you continue to read through, even if you miss a day or two. And I will see you tomorrow.